welcome to the third stage of my reproduction of a 14th century suit of armour. I must apologise for my 5-month hiatus from YouTube. This was partly due to the intensity of another semester at university, and also down to the dire dirge that was hand-stitching this quilted garment, which was a relatively rash decision in hindsight. This stage I will refer to as woeful, terrible, abhorrent, but in all seriousness this was the torturous production of an Aketon. What, you may ask, is this Aketon that plagued you so? Well, allow me to explain it in a very condensed manner. Armour of the medieval period went through many stages of technological development, but it all began with a desire to encase the knight or man-at-arms in a tough yet flexible skin of iron known as mail. This armour was pertinent to all of the medieval period, into the early modern period, and even is still used today for certain applications. Mail has been so widely used because of its versatility, as it is essentially a metal fabric impervious to cuts by a blade. As you can see here, my hand is fully protected from cuts by a blade. However, whilst its fabric-like qualities allowed it in later periods to cover hard-to-armour areas such as the armpits, inside leg, or the inside of the elbow, these qualities also allowed for a vulnerability to blunt impact. Subsequently, a type of armour was developed in order to negate this. One of the first examples of this was the Roman subermalis, or thoracomachus, which, whilst very little is known about it, appears frequently in Roman art and appears to fulfill this function. Padded armour like this evolved to become better fitted to the more fashionable armour of the later Middle Ages, yet it is important to remember that it wasn't a necessity at any time in history to wear padding under mail, as a heavy wool or linen tunic is depicted frequently as the only undergarment worn. This may have acted as a compromise for greater mobility or for use in hotter climates, though this is conjecture and there is very little written on this. The Aketon, though rarely seen in its entirety in medieval art, can be seen poking out underneath armour within many effigies and artworks from this period. These pieces of evidence allow me to create an image of what an Aketon may look like. Archaeology, as in surviving examples, would be incredibly helpful. However, due to the nature of this garment, being made of organic material and being a utilitarian item rather than a fashionable or valuable one, surviving examples are incredibly rare. In fact, I could not find a single original example from the period of 1346 to 1356, and the closest example was the gambeson of Charles VI, which dates to at least 20 years after my period and was designed to be worn over armour, not under it, so it was not explicitly useful to me. However, it did present some fantastic proof for materials used in garments similar to this. This one was made of linen canvas, cotton tow, as well as a silk outer layer which seems to have been more for show than structure. Manuscripts and original accounts reinforce the evidence for these materials. For instance, the regulations made by the armourers of London in the 14th century, which details materials including cotton cloth, raw cotton, and what is called old woven cloth, which I admit is rather ambiguous. If anyone wishes to learn more about cotton in medieval Europe, or is sceptical about its existence due to preconceived notions of cotton belonging to the New World, I implore you to watch this video by Popular Urbanum, who covers similar topics to myself with a far higher level of research and production value. Overall, for materials I decided to use a heavy linen canvas for the outer level, cotton for the lining, and raw cotton for the padding in accordance to the source material. Now, we should have a look at the actual design for this garment. As we know, there are no surviving examples for my period, so I must go to art and manuscripts in order to make a pattern. Firstly, it should be noted that there must be a difference between the Aketons, gambesons, and quilted armours depicted as being worn as standalone armour, or on top of plate armour, and those that would be worn underneath mail and plate armour. This difference, as far as I can tell, is the extent to which the garment fits the form of the wearer, and the thickness of the garment. Unfortunately, after trawling through every resource on the internet available to me until my eyes, so bleached and exfoliated by the toxic glimmer of technology, gave up and abandoned me to unencumbered slumber, I could not find a single resource explicitly depicting or describing the design of an Aketon to be worn beneath armour. Therefore, I embarked upon a quest to piece together a pattern from different sources that showed different exposed parts of the arming garment. What I came up with was this, an 8-piece construction designed to be fitted using a toile, which follows the fashion depicted in medieval art at this time. The nature of this garment should be fitted to what some historians of fashion refer to as the weasel waist of the High Middle Ages, which, as Ian Lespina demonstrates in this article, is very distinctive to this period and different to the later, more widely recognised wasp waist. What this means is that when fitting, the waist must gently follow the natural contours of my waist without being too bulky anywhere. In adherence to history, I also ensured that other aspects would be correct. For example, the direction of quilting will appear in the same way as many sources of the time. The use of buttons may come as a surprise, however I decided to use them because although we never see the front of one of these garments, the civilian quilted doublet of this period is depicted with buttons fastening the front, so logically the same would be possible on a martial garment. Now it was time to put paper to fabric, so in true medieval fashion, without measuring anything, I cut a toile out of some scrap polyester and got to work on pinning. This garment has to be as form-fitting as possible in order to allow for ease of movement, and for the armour resting on top of it to lay its weight evenly. Once the toile was done, I transferred the pattern to the linen outer layer and began cutting. I was given a fantastic over-the-phone tutorial by my grandma, who is a very experienced embroiderer and quilter. She warned me to cut the fabric larger than I needed to in order to avoid extreme shrinkage of the garment when I began quilting. However, as we will see, I strongly overestimated this. Now that the linen, cotton and padding was cut, I began what would become over 150 hours of work, or 5 seasons of Outlander, 4 seasons of Black Sails, 3 seasons of Medici, and all the pre-recorded lectures I missed from a disrupted year of university. Why on earth did it take so long, you may ask? Well, whilst I was using a simple quilting stitch, I stupidly decided to space each line of quilting by 30mm. This was unnecessarily too close together, but never mind. Experience is useful, I suppose. Also, whilst normally when quilting the material is relatively soft and only about 5mm thick, at most, here I was sewing through 25mm at least of cotton batting encased in a layer of what was described by the seller as ideal for combat. Therefore every stitch required a tug with a pair of pliers, slowing down the process even more. If you've watched a few of my videos, you'll know that I am ideologically opposed to sewing machines. Yet, even if you aren't, if you attempt this project, I can assure you that you will be making terror the order of the day for your sewing machine. After 4 months or so, the quilting was completed, and I had lost all motivation after my spirit had been totally and utterly crushed by the task at hand. Nevertheless, I persevered and moved on to stitching the pieces together, whereupon I realised my intense overestimation of the size of fabric needed. Alas, many hours of quilting lay cut on the floor, but now I was nearing the final stages, or so I thought. The stitching took less time than I expected, yet when I began felling seams and hemming, true fatigue set in, and the same menial stitch drove me almost insane. The sense of accomplishment after this was pitiful. What was it all for anyway? 12 hours of buttons and buttonholes didn't help morale much, and with every needle that severed my skin after a misplaced stitch, the box of matches in my drawer started to look friendlier and friendlier. Fortunately, I didn't burn the Aketon. However, even as I started to button up the garment, my resolve was shaking, with fear that it wouldn't fit. However, once I was settled into the Aketon, a wave of relief washed over me as I realised that the silhouette was correct. It fit me relatively well and allowed for unhindered manoeuvrability. Testing it proved that it worked well in conjunction with mail, as it absorbed far more impact than a simple tunic. Overall, the project went well, although it took forever. Of course, as an inexperienced tailor, many things went wrong, such as the vastly different sizes of sleeves from left to right, uneven quilting in some places, though this was swiftly resolved with help from my grandmother and lots of practice, and also I had an unevenness in buttonhole sizes. I'm sure you can tell me what I could improve on in the future, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and while you're at it, please like the video if you enjoyed it, or dislike it if you didn't. Thank you for watching, and yet again I'm sorry for the wait on this video. I will be trying to get more content out at a higher rate from now on, so thank you again for watching, and see you again soon.